On the 23rd of September 2025, I recorded a debate about immigration, integration, and British identity with the longest-serving cabinet minister of the last Conservative government and now editor of The Spectator, Michael Gove, alongside Britain's strictest headmistress, Katharine Birbalsingh. The reason you haven't seen that debate is because The Spectator has banned the footage from being released. That is despite promising to me, in writing, before the debate, as a condition of my participation, to provide me with that footage for release. I acquiesced to their request to release that footage after a 7-day exclusivity window in which they could make all the proceeds of the video when it was monetized on YouTube, which they believed would do very well and generate a lot of publicity. I was told in the studio by one of the producers that they wanted to put it out on the Friday rather than the following day after recording because they wanted to make some time to make some promotional clips, generated a lot of traction on it from social media, and therefore make their money back from the cost of obviously running the studio. But also, it's utterly dishonourable for them to have hidden this footage, because one, I wouldn't have participated in it in the first place if I knew that it could have been shelved and censored and never allowed to see the light of day, especially considering I originally organised a debate between myself and Katharine for this very YouTube channel without The Spectator interceding and acting as an intermediary and ultimately gatekeeper, but also because during the debate, Michael Gove said, and signed off the debate with, the fact that The Spectator prides itself on being the home of free speech, and that even contentious ideas must be debated, discussed, and platformed. Instead, what Michael Gove did was quietly put the editorial kibosh on this and hoped it went away. And this has led to speculation, of course, by people who are eager to see the footage, including the likes of Liz Truss and Dan Wootton, Nick Dixon, Carl Benjamin, and a number of other high-profile names that have commented on this, that Gove's ideas did not stand up to scrutiny. And I must say that I found his answers to my pertinent questions wanting. And the reason that I'm making this video is, number one, because I am opposed in principle to the architects of Britain's present immiseration now appointing themselves the gatekeepers of discourse on the right and going unanswered for their errors or betrayals while in the last Conservative government, but also because if Michael Gove disputes my recollection of the contents of the debate, and I'll be going through some of its contents here because you haven't heard it yet, then they're more than welcome to put out the footage and allow the public to decide for themselves whether or not I am exaggerating, embellishing, and whose ideas got the better of the discussion. Now, the reason that this discourse took off is because I posted about the debate being censored on X, and this was a couple of weeks ago now. This was the 17th of October, almost a month after it had been filmed, after going back and forth behind the scenes with Gove via email. My emails never got any response from Gove himself. He just sent off one very curt email informing us of his intention to withhold the footage and not put it out because he had editorial jurisdiction over the footage, according to him, something that I dispute. And again, if I would have known that he would have tried to do this, or even had the ability to do this, I would not have let him play intermediary in the discussion in the first place. And I had WhatsApp conversations with the various Spectator TV producers and editors who ensure that the content gets out on time, including one of the producers who is a very nice person, so I don't want to personally attack them, but is the person who confirmed in writing that I would be receiving the footage. And I posted the email with their redacted information here on Twitter. This was sent in an exchange on the 17th and 18th of September, in which I asked, will I get a copy of the footage to use for my social media and YouTube channel? And they said, all set for next Tuesday the 23rd. If you'd like to post the footage to your personal channel, we ask that you wait a week from the date of release and ensure the Spectator TV watermark is included. Hope that sounds okay. I confirmed I was happy with that settlement. I signed no other contract. It was never made a condition of my participation that the Spectator have complete editorial jurisdiction over parts of the debate they would like to censor, or whether or not to put out the debate at all. And again, I never would have agreed to it if I knew it could have been shelved. They agreed to not only post the footage, which they reiterated their commitment to, Gove reiterated his commitment to during filming, but also they agreed to it ahead of time that I would be given the footage for my own purposes. So, The Spectator to resolve this dispute at any time can make good on their written and verbal commitment and give me the footage to post for myself if they don't think it lives up to the editorial standards they expect on their own channel. Instead, they've broken that agreement and have never given me a reason. The only communications I got from Michael Gove as to the reason why it would be withheld was this email sent about a week or so before I posted this to Twitter, saying, "Thank you both for coming into the studio for our conversation. I appreciate both of you taking the time. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, it's my responsibility as editor to decide on and take responsibility for the material that appears with the imprimatur of the Spectator. I'm reviewing the broadcast at the moment, and I hope you can bear with me before I update you further. With every good wish, Michael." He did not reply to my rather lengthy email, saying, "I appreciate the update, as I have lots of friends looking forward to watching this when it comes out. It was a robust discussion, and I'm sure the Spectator's viewers will tear me to shreds in the comments. Katharine and I were saying we both enjoyed it on the walk back to Westminster Station, and I will make good on accepting the offer to visit the Michaela School when we can arrange it. For context, Katharine Birbalsingh came into the debate quite charged, worried that I was going to, quote, deport her on a helicopter because she wasn't ethnically British. I had to keep correcting her on the fact that I'm not pushing for a, quote, all-white Britain. I am pushing for a predominantly ethnically British, English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish Britain, because every other country throughout all of human history has only been guaranteed by having its demographic majority remain an unquestionable majority. They are the people for whom the culture and the love of the land burns most deeply in their breast, and so are therefore wanting to defend it and act as custodians of that culture to pass it down the civilizational chain from parent to child over the course of millennia. Britain has been, hitherto 1948, a relatively unmolested country whose demographics have been consistent from 1066 to about 1945, where over 90% of its genetic stock has remained permanent. The Norman Conquest only left a 5% genetic footprint after 1066. This is all in Ed West's book, The Diversity Delusion, which is on the shelf behind me. So I brought all of this up in the debate, and I said to Katharine, what I want is an immigration system which discriminates along the lines of friends and enemies. I don't think the Michaela School, her very strict school which tries to inculcate a majority of its student body, I think only 7% is white British, a majority of its immigrant first or second generation descendant student body into a British identity by having them sing the national anthem, attend English sporting events, recite Rudyard Kipling and read the works of Shakespeare. I think it is a failed enterprise for a number of reasons, as I explained to her in the debate. The first, in my opening remarks, I said that if it succeeds, it's only going to produce a governing class that, especially under the DEI laws we exist in now, will staff the civil service and parliament and essentially end up with a minority ethnic ruling government over the English majority, which will cause ethnic resentment. Secondly, I don't think that it's going to instill a British identity that is supreme over inherited ethnic identities and religious identities, especially because the reason the debate started, as I wrote in this article, in response to Robert Toombs' comments at Now in England, is that Robert Toombs had said during the Now in England debate that the Michaela School makes him believe that young girls in headscarves reciting Rudyard Kipling and singing God Save the King were learning to be English if you were required to do it. And I not only disagree with that, as the crowd did, because being English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish is something inherited, it's a matter of ancestry and family, not a Scout's pledge of vague values that can chop and change at any time. Otherwise, we retroactively deprive our ancestors of that English identity. Henry VIII wasn't all that keen on democracy, but he was very English. What I said was, if you allow these girls to wear their headscarves, they are inheriting an ethnic and religious identity from their families, which is stronger and intractable, and will not be dissolved and overridden by a few years reading Shakespeare at the Michaela School, no matter Katharine's good intentions. And I must say, the reason that I pointed out that Katharine and I got along is because we did. We've always been very cordial, both behind the scenes and on camera. As we walked away from the debate towards Westminster Station, we shook hands. I said I would buy her dinner and introduce her to some of my Zoomer colleagues who she didn't believe existed. She didn't believe that there were virtuous young men who shared my politics, but also weren't engaging in the drink and drug and hookup culture of Westminster, that were getting married, that were returning to church. Because she said, well, one of the main problems, of course, with culture and integration is that the white British themselves aren't going to church. And I pointed out that not only are my audience representative of this revival of Christianity among young men, and Charlie Kirk is, of course, as well, was, sadly, but a lot of my friends who are entering politics are of the same mentality of me and Mr. Kirk. They are virtuous, they are committed Christians, they are family men, and they have the courage to do what it takes to fix this country, even if it gets them called nasty names by the mainstream media. And yes, that did scare someone like Michael Gove. Because during the debate, he pointed out that I occupy a, quote, very niche area of politics, basically saying I'm a fringe figure in the Overton window. He also opened the debate by saying that the success of the Michaela School disturbs or unnerves me. I can't remember the exact word he used, but it was starting off by poisoning the well of the debate. And I just calmly said, no, I'm not disturbed. I think it won't succeed for these reasons. But when Gove had said that I don't think that the multicultural settlement has been a success, I think that only ethnically natively British people, and that means at least one ancestor who is indigenous to these isles, and Christians should be in the civil service, in the government, in positions of power, that I think the Reformation had a few mistakes. Just judging by the state of the Church of England now, it hasn't exactly gone brilliantly, hasn't it? And yes, the Catholic Church has its problems. I've been critical of the last couple of popes, but at least we maintain apostolic succession. I don't want to start a theological war in the comments just when I'm getting everyone on side about free speech. Michael said, well, Connor, you occupy a very fringe position. And I said to him, look, Michael, I feel like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. You guys aren't ready for this yet, but your kids are going to love it. And that's because I know lots of young men who agree with me. It's why I have quite a large audience size. It's why I regularly outpace videos on the Spectator in terms of viewing figures, despite being nowhere near the historic institution that the Spectator is. And if Michael doesn't like my politics, he has to realise that he has been in government for half my lifetime, 14 years. I am now 27. So, I am as much a product of Michael Gove's politics as Katharine Birbalsingh's school is of his education reforms. And so he was flanked by the product of his government. And he didn't like me, but a bit like Batman and the Joker in Batman 89, I was a bit like, you idiot, you made me, I made you. So, the other commitment we made during the debate, and you will see this if and when the footage ever gets released, if they do the right thing, is that Katharine invited me to visit her school, as she often does to her critics, which is again a good faith olive branch extended. And I said, yes, I'm happy to go. And at the end of the debate, Michael said he was glad that I had taken her up on that offer to visit, and Katharine said, as a follow-up to our debate, the Spectator should film it, Michael Gove should come with us, and we can turn it into a mini-documentary. So they had committed to following up, doing extra filming. This is all on video that has not been released. Probably because this commitment is a difficult one to make if, as people have speculated, in lieu of getting conclusive answers because they can't see the footage for themselves, that Michael Gove did not win the debate. Now remember, Michael Gove is meant to be the moderator here, but considering he inserted himself into the situation, I think he made himself fair game for criticism. And he did in fact insert himself into the situation, because originally, as you can see in this DM, I organised this independently with Katharine Birbalsingh. I believe it's in early July. She told Michael Gove, I think it was the following day, and he said he wanted to host it on the Spectator podcast. We delayed and deferred about 2 months because the Spectator was renovating its studio and both Michael and Katharine were unavailable, Katharine because of the school holidays. I was in Australia the day before the debate. I was in Australia for 2 days, so it means I was there for as long as I was flying. I got back and I did the debate immediately after landing, so I made concessions to my schedule. I never asked for an appearance fee. I didn't even have my travel expenses covered, as is common in this space. I just wanted to do it because I thought it was important, and I thought I could ask important questions both to Katharine, who is a good faith interlocutor, and to Michael Gove, who had previously engaged with me on this topic on X, and been quite disparaging, and I think acted in bad faith at the time. So, after I wrote that article, I made the following video that some of you may have seen against Birbalsinghism. It was a clip from a longer episode of Tomlinson Talks about the Now in England conference, and I put out this tweet, that Katharine Birbalsingh's Michaela School is pedestalised as proof of how great Michael Gove's education reforms are, and a solution for the failure of immigrants and their children to integrate organically into British culture. But I don't want to live in a Michaela School state. Michaela tries to bind its student body of different ethnicities and faiths by enforcing militant secularism, vegetarianism, and silence in its corridors upon its students. That influential, self-identifying conservatives think Michaela is a model for an authoritarian headmistress state to manage diversity and multiculturalism should worry us. It represents a replacement of Britain's traditional, high-trust, homogenous, self-governing, spontaneous order with an authoritarian headmistress state to make new tribal minorities and the besieged host majority play nice. And Michael, even though he wasn't tagged, quote retweeted it and said, for any critic of the Michaela School, the best answer is do visit. Connor Tomlinson hasn't. If he had, he might be none the wiser, but he would be better informed. Okay, Michael, I accepted the invitation to visit on camera. For it to be filmed by the Spectator. For it to be totally unfiltered. So why haven't you allowed me to both accept that invitation on camera, and why, if you think I'm ignorant, haven't you allowed the public to decide for themselves which of us has the better account of the situation? So I responded, hello Michael, I don't deny that the school gets exceptional exam results and Katharine seems like a nice and sincere woman. And she is. I disagree with her on plenty of political positions, including the idea that if the 25% of non-native British people living in the British Isles left, the entire country would collapse tomorrow. There are some of those people that, of course, we would like to stay. They're our friends and our family members and have contributed. However, Britain, before all of them showed up, was one of the best countries in the world. So no, diversity is not our strength. I'll continue. But that does not mean the Michaela School at scale is a good way to run a country. That is being proposed by multiple conservatives, like Roma Toombs and Kemi Badenoch, who think forcing a monoculture of British values upon native Brits and immigrants alike is a solution to integration. During the debate, by the way, and this is very important, and perhaps something that Michael doesn't want people to see, is that Katharine Birbalsingh said to Michael Gove that she agrees that his version of British values that he invented in the Department of Education in 2014, the 5 fingers of British values that said that Britain could be boiled down to democracy, tolerance, freedom of speech, the rule of law, and fair play, she said, that version of British values is nonsense, so knock it off. Almost an exact quote. Perhaps a reason why the footage has been withheld, despite the written commitment to provide it to me and to post it. I'll continue. All it means is that authoritarianism is necessary to achieve the levels of organic peace and prosperity that Britain had before mass immigration. Given you spent a decade at the dispatch box repeating how diversity is our strength, he said that when announcing the definition of extremism, I believe it was in March of 2024, before the general election. So he is committed to the ideology that has led us to this ethnic and culturally fractured point on the precipice of civil conflict. I'll continue. You, Michael, helped to contribute to this broken and divided culture. You might think it would require the state to turn into a Michaela School with militant secularism, vegetarianism, and enforced silence in public spaces to fix it. But if it weren't for immigration, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Stop putting the British people and their culture on equal footing with imported enclaves who demand we make concessions to accommodate them, and this problem is solved. During the debate, Michael kept trying to bring the conversation back to procedural discussions about education reform. And if you notice, in a lot of his interviews recently, including his debate with Zia Youssef at the Reform Conference, more of an interview than a debate, the only thing that the last government is often credited with is, of course, the education reforms. Now, as someone who went through them, I don't rate them very much. But what you're seeing here is a concerted effort by aligned publications to reform Michael Gove's reputation. This is the case with The Spectator, Unheard, GB News, The Telegraph, the Art Conference that platformed him, all of which are owned by his friend, longtime hedge fund manager Paul Marshall, father of Winston Marshall. Now, Paul Marshall owning all of these outlets, he may have the best intentions in the world to try and provide a new media environment to speak to the left-behind patriotic majority in the country. However, appointing Michael Gove as the editor of The Spectator, and the first thing Michael Gove did as editor of The Spectator was endorse Kamala Harris for president, I would say that that leaves some wanton judgment on Paul Marshall's part, and it seems to be even more wanton judgment now that Michael Gove is playing gatekeeper about the discourse that we can allow on the right. But all of those outlets often cite education reform as the one positive thing the last government did, which means that Michael Gove is the only positive thing that came out of the last government, even though Gove was central to the lockdowns, the expansion of the civil service despite calling it the blob, championed all of the immigration policies that have ruined our country, and during the debate, he listed off a bunch of non-English, non-native British politicians and said, do I have an issue with them being in public life? He said Rishi Sunak, and I said, what? He minted a diversity-built Britain coin and increased Indian migration against everyone's wishes. Or Priti Patel, who called Indian migrants living bridges, a term used by Prime Minister Modi's Hindutva regime to explain how he wants to disperse his excess male demographic across the globe to create diaspora communities to then leverage as democratic and thereby demographic fodder to advantage India in politics abroad. He also said, Zia Yusuf. Now this part of the conversation became uncomfortable, because we were discussing whether or not Islam belongs in British political life. I maintain no, because even if you know nice Muslims, Majid Nawaz, for example, who I just engaged in an Oxford Union debate with, is a very intelligent man. I disagree with him on many things. I agree with him on many things. He seems like a nice chap. However, even if you individually know people who cling to the Muslim faith, various interpretations of it, which can be disputed, Islam, if you input it like a code, like a software, into Britain's hardware, does not produce Britain at the end of it. It produces lots of other nations that I do not want to live with. Some more tolerable, like the Emiratis, some far less tolerable, like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya. Take your pick. And if you would like to live in those countries, or as I said to Michael Gove, if you like India, which he said he did, well, you can go and live there rather than turning my country into Afghanistan, Iraq, or India. When he mentioned Zia Yusuf, I said, well, I don't want to speak for Zia Yusuf, because during Michael's discussion at the Reform Conference with Zia, when he asked him about his Muslim faith, Zia was inconclusive about the denomination that he is part of. And he has never disclosed the denomination that he clings to in Islam. Whether he's Sufi, whether he's Sunni, whether he's Shia, whether he's a secret Salafist who brushes his teeth in the exact way that Muhammad was meant to. And I suggested that he has perhaps kept private about his faith, either as an electorally expedient strategy, which I think will ultimately fail, or because being an apostate from Islam in Britain brings the very real threat of violence, especially if you are a public figure. And Michael Gove was incredulous at the idea that you could be killed for apostasy in our country. Michael, honour-based violence on your watch and jihadist attacks has gone up exponentially because you kept allowing violent jihadists into the country. And this was a topic that made Michael Gove very uncomfortable. So, I'm putting this again all on record because if my account of this is disputed, please release the footage and disprove me. So I said all this to Gove, and Gove responded, there is literally no one I know arguing for compulsory national vegetarianism and enforced silence in the public square. Michael, it is an analogy. It is an analogy for the concessions that have to be made to make multiculturalism work. He says, there are, however, millions benefiting from coalition school reforms. See again, the trumpeting of his own education reforms as the only good thing the Conservative government did. They are trying to prime you, Gove included, for his reintroduction into public life, because he still wants to wield political influence and play kingmaker over who should be in the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, or in the Reform Party, seemingly Zia Yusuf, and who gets to write and publish and appear on The Spectator, the most premium, long-standing right-wing magazine in Britain, which still, even if the readership is dwindling and the subscription numbers are falling off because they don't like Michael Gove and the way that he's running the magazine, it still has a premium and an influence in Westminster. So, this is a very important operation being run to reform the reputation of Michael Gove, and perhaps that being at stake is, as some have speculated, the reason why the debate footage has not been released. Michael finished, but I see from your work that the fight against ignorance goes on. Excellent, Michael. If I am so ignorant, why not let the public see for themselves? Clearly, you thought that having me on The Spectator to educate me was the best course of action. Do you not think that you did a sufficient job of doing that? I would say allow the public to determine who got the better of that discussion. I then responded to Michael saying that Robert Toombs had said what he said about the Michaela School, that Kemi Badenoch at ARC had said conservatives are the guardians of Western civilization, and had cited Michaela School as a defender of Western civilization, and said that Katharine Birbalsingh banning all forms of prayer in response to Muslim parents trying to sue the school because their children weren't allowed to pray in the playground was itself how you defend Western civilization. We're a Christian country. We shouldn't suppress our Christian identity, dismantle our established church, or at least forego improving it, given how fallen it has become, in order to ensure institutional neutrality where there cannot be one, because there are pockets, enclaves, of indigestible ethnic and religious tribalism all across our country that never needed to be here in the first place. We should not be shy about our Christian heritage and our Christian identity and our Christian faith because imported minorities, like Muslims, don't like it. We should not all have to live under the banner of grey goo multiculturalism just to make diversity work. It is a fallacy, it won't work, and it's undesirable for the natives who have voted against it whenever offered and were betrayed by your government, Michael, with more immigration and multiculturalism instead. Katharine herself has said, that's what you do to make multiculturalism work. You sacrifice things that are important to you. And I asked, what if I don't want to make multiculturalism work? What if my culture, my religion, my country was just fine before every other incompatible doctrine showed up and demanded equal or special treatment? We don't have to sacrifice all the things that make Britain better than and distinct from all other countries to appease hostile minorities. We don't have to run our state like the Michaela School, but that's what members of the Conservative establishment, which you helped build, still propose. Bear in mind, Michael Gove proposed to host this debate after I sent these tweets. And after I pointed out to him that even though he says no one I know is arguing for compulsory national vegetarianism, I did point out that the Spectator, the week that he sent that tweet, ran a piece justifying why all restaurants might go halal because of, obviously, the demographic change that results from mass migration, which then creates market demand for halal butchery and meat. It's a bit like having a vegan at a barbecue. You have one, you make a vegan burger. They keep coming to the barbecue, and the rest of the people start having vegan burgers foisted upon them in order to make special concessions for the one person whose dietary requirements require everyone else to make concessions. What if I don't want to eat vegan burgers? What if I've always voiced my opposition to eating vegan burgers? Why should I have vegan burgers foisted upon me? Same with halal. This piece says, if a restaurant goes that way for commercial reasons, halal, that also betrays a strange, slightly fearful attitude to hospitality. So here's my advice to restaurants. Ignore the comments and do what you want. The customer isn't always right. Right. So ignore people complaining about not wanting to eat halal meat because a minority of people who were never invited into this country by the native population want to eat halal meat. No one I know is arguing for compulsory national vegetarianism, according to Michael Gove, but they are arguing for compulsory halal in his magazine, which he edits, which presumably is a piece he signed off on. So, as I said, I set up this discussion with Katharine. They confirmed, in writing, that I would receive the footage. I responded to Michael when he said we might put the kibosh on this by saying I could upload the footage to my own YouTube channel a week after The Spectator has released it, given I originally set up the conversation between myself and Katharine just for YouTube. If there are any editorial reservations about posting the footage, I would ask that it be considered that I did this conversation, set it up prior to allowing Spectators to host it, that I cut short a work trip to Australia and flew back for 24 hours the day before so we could film it, and that I didn't ask to be paid for all expenses covered because I thought it would be a worthwhile conversation. And it was. And it's frustrating that none of you have seen it, because I think I performed quite well in the debate, and I'm happy for those who think I didn't, or are primed to disagree with my ideas, to judge for themselves. I said, Gove had signed off the recording with his commitment to free speech and discourse. I hope we can all honour that in good faith, both during and after the debate. If it doesn't meet Spectator expectations, for whatever reason, I would ask to at least have our agreement be honoured and I be given the footage to upload to YouTube. And Katharine, behind the scenes and publicly, had said that she enjoyed the debate, she wanted it posted, and that she was saddened that it had been withheld. Katharine posted underneath my tweet, "It is a shame that it isn't coming out, Connor, but we can do a chat on your channel sometime in the new year. And you invited me to dinner, I'm going to hold you to that." Now, I will honour that commitment. I also hope to honour the commitment to visit the school. I think it should be filmed. It'll be an interesting piece. Perhaps the dinner should be recorded too, so you can hear the discussion. But it is impossible to recreate the organic nature of the debate doing it secondhand, re-recording it. And the recording already exists. It is irreplaceable. There is no reason that it shouldn't be released. Another element of the debate was that I brought up to Michael Gove the fact that he had given Yoram Hazony's book, The Jewish State, which makes an explicitly ethno-nationalist case for the existence of Israel as a nation, for Jews as a people, not necessarily a religion, because remember, socialist prime minister, founding prime minister David Ben-Gurion was himself not religious, even though he hosted Bible study seminars for his ministers. Old Testament, of course, not new. He set it up constitutionally as a state for ethnic Jews. This is why there is a right of return policy that only ethnic Jews are eligible for. Fine. I want what Israel has. I want the same standard because it seems to work. And I asked Michael Gove why he provided the following cover endorsement from his review of Yoram's book in the Times in the early 2000s. Quote, "Quite simply the best guide to appear this year to the dominant ideological questions of our time, and why Gove recently appeared at a march against anti-Semitism in London, but why he has a different standard for Britain. Why he thinks that Britain must be liberal and multicultural, but Israel can be an ethno-state with a dominant religion." And Gove responded, well, there's a different set of conditions that allow Israel to exist. So Israel is the exception to the liberal multicultural rule. Sorry, I'm not content with that. Inadequate answer, I'm afraid, and I don't think we should tolerate completely optional crimes committed by immigrants and their children, and the terraforming beyond recognition of areas of our country into third world slums, just because we have to be liberal and multicultural, while Israel gets to be a nation for its distinct people, for its faith, and practice its national interests and defend them with force and enjoy the likes of Michael Gove's unquestionable support. And he also said that it is a strength of Israel that its democracy would hypothetically allow for a non-Jew to take power. Now, I pointed out that it is not only inconceivable that Jews would vote a non-Jew to be Prime Minister or President of Israel, but that also, if that were to happen, it would be a sign that the demographics in Israel had changed to such an extent that Israel as a country would no longer exist. I want that same standard for Britain. And when I pressed on this, I said, I don't see why there is this double standard. This double standard frustrates people. I just want what Israel has. The conversation moved quickly on. I don't feel that I was given an adequate answer to that question, which highlighted an important contradiction for domestic politics and international relations. I hope the footage is provided, as promised, so that you can make up your own minds as to who got the better of that part of the conversation, and to press on getting an actual answer that is coherent from people practicing this double standard, which is inflicting completely preventable atrocities on our country and our people. So after the debate, I put this post out. I filmed the debate today about immigration, integration, and British identity with Katharine, Birbalsingh, and Michael Gove. It will be out by Friday. As promised by Gove, in his closing remarks, which is on camera, it will not be edited, as in it would not be censored. It would, of course, be compiled together with different camera shots and have the audio synced up to the video, but that it would not be censored. That was very important. Nothing I said will be censored. I think you're all going to enjoy it. And I'd quote retweeted Katharine Birbalsingh, who had promoted on the day of recording that she was filming it, and she said, we have the chat out at the end of the week, so we were told that was what was going to happen. She had said this before I even had, so this is corroborated. Connor and I didn't agree, but I do think we cleared up some misunderstandings. We found points where we agree. I invited him to Michaela. He invited me to have dinner with him and his friends. All in all, a success. So we have a consistent account here. The only gaping hole in this narrative is the reason the Spectator hasn't provided for releasing the footage. So as I said in my long post, I agreed to visit the Michaela School. Michael offered to come with us and film it for the Spectator as a kind of mini documentary. And Gove ended the recording by saying something to the effect of, we at the Spectator believe in free speech and platforming views that we disagree with. Apparently not. As I also mentioned, the reason that Katharine and I initially started DMing, because we had shared a stage, one after the other, at the Family Education Trust conference in June, but not spoken before, is because she had an argument with Pete North, Northern Variant, on X about my article. Pete North had quoted the article and linked to it, and Katharine had responded to him on Twitter. Now, this debate organically restarted again in late October on the 26th, and Katharine and Pete went back and forth about whether or not singing God Save the King, Jerusalem, and I Vow to Thee My Country is a sufficient means of integrating the sons and daughters, or even first generation, immigrants. So the original conversation that prompted me to get in contact with Katharine restarted of its own accord, meaning it is of significant public interest. It hits at the fault line of prescient political issues, like immigration, integration, and whether or not we can have a cohesive society after the, what I would describe as demographic vandalism run against us by the last Conservative government. And Michael Gove decided to re-engage with the debate by saying, I stand with Katharine. So, Michael acknowledges that this is of public interest. Michael is willing to wade into the debate, even though he is currently censoring the footage that has already been filmed of a debate featuring the three of us. As I responded to Gove, there's still time to release the footage of our debate. This debate, tonight on X, remains of interest to the public. You never gave a reason why you broke your agreement to provide me with the footage. Correcting that mistake would be the honourable thing to do. I ratioed him. I would be surprised if Michael had not seen this response. Silence still. I have received nothing from anyone working at The Spectator involved in this decision, from the editorial team, from Gove himself, since I spoke last to a Spectator TV editor on WhatsApp asking why I would not be provided with the footage as promised in that email, and that was before I sent that very long tweet on October the 17th. Other than that, I've received no correspondence or rationale from The Spectator or Michael Gove himself, despite him engaging in this debate again. Now, topic of free speech is pertinent because I was interviewed about this on Dan Wootton Outspoken last week. The interview has 65,000 views, almost. Also, my original tweet, at this point, has 773,000 views. So combined across all of the tweets made with post engagements from the likes of Dan Wootton, Liz Truss, Carl Benjamin, all of these engagements have amassed well over millions of impressions. So I would wager that those who believe the Spectator should be consistent in their commitment to free speech, as Michael Gove said on video, think that this is a bad look. This has been, ultimately, a PR nightmare for the Spectator. And I have seen claims, which I can't verify, of course, because you never know what you read online, that people have cancelled their Spectator subscriptions over this. So, it is perplexing to me as to why you would invite me for the debate, and then attempt to shelve it, thinking you could contain me, a notorious troublemaking loudmouth on the internet, with a relatively large platform. I just hit 100,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm nearly, about 90,000 subscribers on YouTube? That's pretty significant. I regularly get views of 100 to 200,000 on a video. So why you would think I just take this lying down and be quiet about it is very odd to me. But the rationale of filming the debate and then thinking whether or not you got the upper hand, that you could shelve it, and that this would somehow be less damaging than just hosting the debate and allowing the public to decide for themselves in the first place, I don't understand that logic. Because if inevitably you make good on your written commitment to provide me with the footage and either post it yourselves in order to mitigate some of the perception by Spectator viewers and subscribers that you don't actually believe in free speech as you purport, Michael, or you just provide me with the footage and I put it out anyway, as promised, then it's going to look doubly bad because now you've created a massive drama and increased interest in the debate by people who otherwise might not have known about it or been as interested because it's been censored. So you've created essentially a Streisand effect for yourself and made it look like that either you lost and wanted to suppress it, which, again, I don't know the reason why the Spectator has withheld it. The only reason I've been given is because of decisions made by the senior editors, so presumably Michael Gove, given he took responsibility for it in that email he sent to me, and it was the only correspondence with him after the debate was filmed. But why you would think that suppressing it would be a good look, and that I wouldn't make noise about this? Why you would think that was a good idea? or even the remotest possibility, is beyond me. I don't understand it. But anyway, when I was interviewed about this on Dan Wootton's show, I said that I had approached the Free Speech Union by a friend that works there, and they do good work, so I don't wish to disparage the union. They are working on behalf of Pete North, for example, when he got arrested in the dead of night for an anti-Hamas meme. They helped Alison Pearson. They've helped Lucy Connolly. They've helped lots of people who have been unfairly persecuted by the state for perfectly reasonable opinions online. They helped Hamit Yoskin, who burned the Quran outside the Turkish embassy. They helped the police officer who had his home raided and had his very Brexity books seized. So they do good work. I don't wish to disparage them. But I did mention that as a member of the Free Speech Union, I had approached them via a proxy who works with them, and I'd been told this one isn't for us. This was then clipped by World by Wolf for X, saying, as a member of the union, I'm appalled to hear they abandoned another member when he needed them. And I said, to be clear, I don't resent the Free Speech Union for not taking up my dispute with the Spectator. I'm a member and they do good work, helping the people that I mentioned, including attempting to help me when during my master's dissertation in 2021, it was marked down by an academic who not only said I was wrong to state that the Soviet Union had run concentration camps, despite me citing the telegram from Lenin where he coined the term, according to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, but also this academic had co-written a book with another academic who had attempted to sue my former Tomlinson Talks co-host, Kevin O'Sullivan, and made up that Kevin had assaulted him on a train when CCTV footage proved the contrary. He had co-written some work with that academic, so it seemed personal and political. They had attempted to overturn this. Unfortunately, a Palestinian Marxist was in charge of the school at the time and had final authority on whether or not the marks were legitimate, and despite the disparity between a 2-2 and a first, it was the only 2-2 I'd ever received for my course, despite being politically contentious while I was there, as you can imagine, they denied the remark. But the Free Speech Union tried on my behalf, so again, I'm not disparaging them. I said my problems with the Spectator, who praised the work of the Free Speech Union and provide a weekly column for Lord Toby Young, while censoring the footage of my debate with their editor, the longest-serving cabinet minister of the last government. Credibility cannot withstand hypocrisy. We should keep quiet when people on our ostensible side flout their stated principles, just because they are our friends, or gatekeep access to large platforms and lucrative opportunities. I was encouraged when initially I got a notification on my phone that said Toby Young had retweeted this, despite, of course, not being tagged in it. But he does follow me. That retweet was then retracted, and I received a quote retweet instead. Totally reasonable. Hi Connor, Toby wrote. In the past, we've been asked on several occasions to take up cases of people whose comments or articles in newspapers and magazines have been deleted or spiked and declined to do so. We take the view that an official FSU complaint about an editorial decision would be an attempt to encroach on the freedom of the press. Your case is similar, I think. I don't think the case is similar. I understand the position Toby Young is in, especially because he is friends with Michael Gove, and he was given his peerage as Lord of Acton by Kemi Badenoch, the apprentice of Michael Gove, who herself worked at The Spectator. However, as I said, I appreciate the clarification and respect the position he is in. In this instance, I think the editorial decision is inexcusable, not because editorial decisions can be made about content, but one, I had it in writing that I would get the footage in the first place, so it seems a breach of our contract, which was a condition upon which I participated in the debate and would not have otherwise. But also, it is hypocritical of Michael Gove to reiterate his commitment to free speech during the debate on film and present The Spectator as a platform which champions the work of the Free Speech Union, and then attempt to block the footage from being released for unknown reasons. But as people have speculated, it's because he's trying to contain the debate, and he didn't like how he performed. That his perspective didn't stand up to scrutiny. The Spectator as an outlet will continue to have a cloud of doubt cast over its commitment to civil discourse as long as it refuses to release the footage. It may not be a legal matter for the Free Speech Union, but it may be a legal matter, as I'll come on to in a moment, but I think it is a violation by The Spectator of the principles it purports to share with the FSU. Now, I say it might be a legal matter because, as Stephen Barrett, a barrister who often appears on GB News, and I believe has written for The Spectator before, has said he doesn't understand how The Spectator can lawfully deny me the footage, because I had it in writing, ahead of the recording, that I would be provided with it. So, an update. The dispute with The Spectator is now in the hands of my lawyers. Thank you to the Bad Law team, who reached out and said they are happy to assist me with this matter. Without prejudicing my privilege to receive confidential legal counsel, I will say that I will take seriously the advice that I am given to escalate this, if I am advised to do so. I will say that it would be very unwise for the Spectator to mishandle, misplace, or even delete the footage which they no doubt have in their archives. I think I've made it pretty clear by now that I intend to pursue the procurement of this either by public pressure to hold you to your principles or exploring the prospect of challenging the breach of contract, which I believe has happened here, and clearly other people, including accredited barristers, are saying publicly. And Stephen doesn't have to say this. Again, his credibility's on the line as a barrister, so he seems to think legally they can't deny me this footage. And so this is why I've made this video, is because I just wanted to show you the hoops that I have to go through. The hoops that people who are not willing to walk the establishment line, that are willing to just say what they think, unfiltered, without fearing some expedient political ambition being cast into the darkness. Someone who is more bothered about fixing the state of my country and handing it off onto my future children, God willing, which I'll start to have next year, than being published in The Spectator, or even platformed on GB News at this rate, considering the vast network of associated organisations under the Paul Marshall umbrella. I just want you to understand the lengths that we have to go to just get unfiltered, uncontained debate out there. And debate is all we're allowed to do at the moment, remember? Because we exist under Soviet-style censorship conditions, where anything I say on the internet could be a reason for the police to kick down my door. So, to do anything else is giving the state an excuse to throw you in prison, and you will either suffer the fate of Lucy Connolly or Peter Lynch, to varying degrees of lethality, depending on the prison that you're thrown into. So, understand the extent of the containment operations underway on the ostensible right. I am willing to pursue this as far as resources will allow me. The only thing that you can do to help, as people have already started doing, is make it clear that you want to see this footage too. Because without my instruction, I was informed by friends that it has become an unavoidable topic in the YouTube comments and replies of anything to do with Michael Gove. So this was a debate on Unheard that was hosted about 2 weeks ago. And the top comment, the top voted comment, is Gove and the Spectator crowd are cowards. Release the debate with Connor Tomlinson to the public like you promised. Let the world see Connor intellectually kick your butt. Or on the latest episode of his podcast of Quite Right, there are multiple comments saying, don't be a tit, release the Birbalsingh-Tomlinson debate. There are others, release the Tomlinson-Birbalsingh debate, Gove. Still no Tomlinson-Birbalsingh interview. And this was the case underneath Michael Gove's post, because before I had even replied and ratioed, there were lots of people saying that, release the debate footage. Michael, we all the public want to see the footage of the Spectator's debate. Release the footage. Some people are being very harsh, of course, and I don't think we need to be unduly disparaging. I've attempted to be as polite as possible and comport myself with the kind of decorum I think is becoming of an Englishman, both in the debate footage and online. But if you are so inclined to politely make your interest in seeing this debate footage heard, please, you're welcome to. If you're a subscriber to The Spectator, email The Spectator and express your disappointment. If you're watching The Spectator's stuff on YouTube, if you have an X account, I advise you to politely, well punctuated of course, make your interest in seeing this footage getting out there known. Because it seems that although they're trying to gatekeep and contain the discourse that is allowed on the side that is interested in fixing our country in the dire straits that the likes of Michael Gove put it in, it seems that pure stubbornness means that they can't contain the conversation as easily as they used to. Back when the establishment media and their colleagues in Westminster had a stranglehold on discourse. And I must say thank you to Elon Musk's X for liberating we Englishmen whose speech is being tightly controlled both by the state and by the people who hold the microphone on what is meant to be our political side, standing for the right to an Englishman to speak his mind. So, you're welcome to let the Spectator know that you want to see this footage, and in the meantime, I'll be fighting for its release. And if and when it is inevitably provided, as was promised in writing, I guarantee you will all enjoy watching it. And if my account of the debate, if my recollection is wrong, I am happy for the record to be corrected by putting the footage out there and letting the public decide who won the day on that one.